In the Latter-day Saint Temple Endowment, members are invited to make sacred covenants with God to live the law of consecration, which means dedicating their time, talents, and everything with which the Lord has blessed them to building up Jesus Christ's church on the earth. In the early days of the church, the law of consecration entailed participating in the United Order and giving all of their property to the church for distribution. While today we no longer participate in the United Order, the law of consecration is still in full effect and asks us to be willing to give everything to the Lord and his church. There are often questions about how the early members lived the law of consecration back then versus how we live it today. Many are also curious about the difference between the law of sacrifice and the law of consecration, since both of them seem to be about giving something up. And you can see my previous video on the law of sacrifice here. So in today's video, we'll be giving a brief history of the law of consecration, how it applies to us today, the difference between the law of sacrifice and the law of consecration, and of course the why behind the covenant. The word consecration comes from Latin roots, which essentially mean to make sacred. To consecrate something is to make something sacred by dedicating it to God. The ideals behind the law of consecration go back thousands of years. In the New Testament, it teaches us that the earliest Christians had all things common, as it tells us in the book of Acts. In the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith learned that after Jesus Christ's appearance in America, the people had all things common among them. Therefore, they were not rich and poor, bond and free, but they were all made free and partakers of the heavenly gift. In Joseph Smith's translation of the Bible, he learned that Enoch established the city of Zion, whose people were of one heart and one mind. There was no poor among them. So for dispensations, the mark of a truly righteous covenant people is the consecration of material goods for the benefit of the whole covenant community. In the early 1830s, the Lord revealed the law of consecration to Joseph Smith as found in the Doctrine and Covenants. In this early implementation of the law, Latter-day Saints would sign over their property to the church. The bishop would then allocate properties as stewardships to the owners according to their family's needs. Surplus goods and property would be distributed among the poor and needy and to help sustain the church. The United Order was founded in 1832 as an organization to help manage this process. Implementing this law was understandably difficult. Latter-day Saints were immigrating to Ohio and Missouri from a variety of circumstances. Personal greed, persecution of the saints, and other extenuating circumstances eventually forced the United Order to stop functioning in 1834. BYU professor Stephen Harper has commented that some think when the United Order ended, that ended the law of consecration. However, that is a little like saying if NASA ceased operation, the laws of rocket propulsion would nullify as a result. According to the Church Handbook and the Temple, we fulfill the law of consecration today by giving the Lord our time, our talents, and everything with which the Lord has blessed us. In 1838, the Lord revealed the law of tithing as a component of the law of consecration. The law of tithing dictates that members are to give 1/10 of their interest annually to the church and the building up of the kingdom. Today, many Latter-day Saints interpret that to mean they are to give 10% of their annual income to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this is one way we can live the law of consecration today, by giving back to the Lord a portion of what he has blessed us with for the building up of his kingdom on the earth. But there are other ways of living the law of consecration, such as fasting and donating a fast offering. Many members dedicate the first Sunday of each month as a fast Sunday where they abstain from food for 2 meals. They then take the money they would have spent on that food and donate it to the church for the sustaining of the poor and needy. And church leaders have consistently encouraged us to give generous fast offerings. Elder L. Tom Perry has said that the longer I live, the more impressed I am with the Lord's system of caring for the poor and needy. Surely no man would think of such a simple yet profound way of satisfying human needs. To grow spiritually and temporally through periodic fasting and then donating the amount saved from refraining from partaking of those meals to the bishop to be used to administer to the needs of the poor, the ill, the downtrodden, who need help and support to make their way through life. Besides these 2 concrete ways of donating money, we are also to donate time, talents, and other material possessions to God's church. This may take the form of, for example, magnifying your callings. This may require spending extra time and effort on projects in the ward to help brothers and sisters in need. It may require you to volunteer your time and talents in music or administration, technology, teaching to help members of your ward and stake flourish in their testimonies of the gospel. How you live the law of consecration is ultimately up to you, so each family and individual should earnestly pray about how they can best fulfill this covenant. There may be specific needs in the covenant community that the Lord wants you to fill, or there may be specific material attachments that the Lord wants you to sever. And we should frequently be reflecting on whether we'd be willing to give everything we have to the Lord and his kingdom. The scriptures teach that the purpose of the law of consecration, of having all things common, of engendering equality, is to create a Zion society. It's intended to knit the covenant community together in unity and love. It refines individuals and it bonds communities together. The commandment to consecrate everything we have to God's kingdom helps us to magnify the second great commandment to love thy neighbor as thyself. Consecration is an exercise in supreme selflessness, and it asks us to help all of our brothers and sisters in the covenant community. Commenting on this subject, President John Taylor observed that the law of consecration is a celestial law, and when observed, its adherents become a celestial people. Thus, men and women today can become as Enoch's people of one heart and one mind, and there was no poor among them. Orson Pratt, an early apostle, observed that if the Lord's people aspire to the celestial kingdom, they must begin to learn the order of life that is there. Both the law of sacrifice and the law of consecration have to do with giving things up, and so there's understandable ambiguity on how they're different. On the one hand, having overlap between the covenants is not necessarily a bad thing. The whole purpose of the temple is to help us become better disciples of Jesus Christ, and so it makes sense that we're going to iterate over the same gospel principles over and over to help us progressively improve. On the other hand, I think there are some distinctions we can make between the law of sacrifice and the law of consecration. Now, I'm still learning and on my journey, but the way I've always seen it is that the law of sacrifice is about giving something up, and the law of consecration is about giving something to a larger cause. The law of sacrifice is focused on refining ourselves, and the law of consecration is focused on using that refining process to bless the lives of others in the covenant community. As we've talked about in a previous video, the heart of the law of sacrifice is about offering a broken heart and a contrite spirit to the Lord. It's about humbling yourself before the Lord and using contrition to strip yourself of pride. So this law focuses more on the first great commandment to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. The heart of the law of consecration is offering our material goods and gifts to our peers in the covenant community. It's one thing to give things that are precious to you to a perfect and loving omnipotent God. It is something else entirely to be willing to offer up your precious commodities to imperfect humans. Yet that is exactly what the law of consecration asks us to do. We're to offer our time, talents, and material possessions to building up the church and the covenant community, which is run by imperfect mortals. And so the law of consecration focuses very intensely on the second great commandment to love thy neighbor as thyself. The law of consecration builds upon the law of sacrifice by asking us to give up something precious to us and then dedicating it to the Lord by giving it to a mortal who may or may not appreciate how precious it is to you. It's an exercise in selflessness, discipline, and Christ-like love for all mankind. As each person in the covenant community does their best to live this law of consecration, it engenders greater love, happiness, and charity overall. Like the law of sacrifice and the law of obedience, the law of consecration helps us to wholly submit our wills to the Father. Elder Neal A. Maxwell has said, "A stumbling block appears when we serve God generously with time and checkbooks, but still withhold portions of our inner selves, signifying that we are not yet fully His." The law of consecration helps us to live a more celestial life now, by stripping us of selfishness, pride, and materialism. This law also helps give our lives more purpose and meaning, since we are to dedicate our life's work, professions, and passions to the Lord and His kingdom. As we dedicate our lives to the Lord and to others, the Lord will sanctify our lives. Consecration engenders greater compassion and charity towards our fellow man, and it increases our gratitude for all that the Lord's given us. And when we do our best to live the laws of obedience, sacrifice, gospel, chastity, and consecration, we are well on our way to becoming a better disciple of Jesus Christ.